Peace reigns over a large part of Europe, but France is the theater for some worrying military preparations. Thousands of soldiers are being enrolled, and different army corps are being assembled. But Emperor Napoleon I is saying loud and clear that he does not want another war. In 1811, Napoleon controls Europe, from the Mediterranean to the Niemen River. He is counting on fighting the British with Russian support. Since his victory over Tsar Alexander in Friedland in 1807 and the Treaty of Tilsit, France and Russia are officially allies. But Alexander doesn't support Napoleon's expansionist strategy. And irrespective of their treaties, Alexander allows English merchant ships access to his ports. For Napoleon, Russia's behavior makes it an enemy of France. Armand de Caulaincourt has been French ambassador to St. Petersburg for 4 years. He understands Russia perfectly.
I hear they miss you greatly in St. Petersburg. And they even organized a banquet in honor of your departure. Have you turned into a Russian, Caulaincourt?
You know I've been requesting a transfer back to Paris for 2 years, sir.
2 years, yes. I hope you took advantage of your time there to get to know your friend Alexander. So, why is he refusing to close his ports to the British?
It's not what one might call a declaration.
When we signed the peace treaty in Tilsit 4 years ago, he told me,
I hate the English as much as you do.
And I answered, in that case, we have peace. But he didn't keep his word.
It was you who invaded Germany. You support the Poles, and you are amassing troops on the frontiers during peacetime.
Caulaincourt used to be Napoleon's aide-de-camp. He knows how to gain his trust and his benevolence. But despite his admiration for Napoleon, he won't let himself be blinded. He can clearly see his game, and he fears for France.
Nothing can justify this campaign you're leading so far from Paris. Too many have already died on the battlefield.
Ah, Caulaincourt. You don't understand business.
Russia is vast, and the climate is harsh. They will let you come and wear out your troops forced to march. They won't fight. They will wait for winter.
You no longer have confidence in me. Caulaincourt, don't worry. Look upon the war in Russia as one that makes sense.
War. The word has finally been spoken. Over the following months, Napoleon continues to amass his troops from all four corners of Europe, sending them towards the borders of the Russian Empire. Tsar Alexander knows this confrontation is inevitable. He hesitates lengthily between two strategies. Should he set out to meet the French or draw them towards Moscow? To thwart the French spies, his plan must remain secret from the majority of the general staff and the Russian people. Napoleon continues to ignore calls for caution. As Caulaincourt noticed, he had gone back down that irresistible path towards his destiny. Day one of the campaign, 500,000 men. They speak French in the ranks, but also Italian, German, Polish, Portuguese, and Spanish. It's an army of 20 nations. The First Empire, marching towards its destiny. Napoleon wants a flash campaign, a demonstration of force that will suffice, in his mind, to make the Tsar see sense. He wants to achieve his dream of bringing all the peoples of Europe together as one. They'd been promised they would soon be going home. But beyond the Niemen River, which marks the frontier between Poland and the Russian Empire, they are entering the unknown.
The most important thing to say about the Grande Armée is that it's enormous. The biggest army anyone's ever seen in European history.
The particularity about Napoleon's Grande Armée was that it had very high numbers of civilians.
Some officers, even non-commissioned officers, brought wives and children with them, even mistresses. So the caravan was quite an assorted one.
Some had been with him since the Egyptian campaign. They were the old guard and were the bedrock of the Grande Armée. They trusted and followed this man. To him, he was a star, a genius.
Napoleon is enjoying the start to his campaign. He's made it. He's in the land of the Tsars. In a letter to his wife, Marie-Louise, he reveals his optimism and a certain indifference.
My friend, nothing significant has happened. I'm in good health, but the heat is excessive.
Napoleon's real adversary in terms of ensuring the French domination of Europe was England. His aim was to bring England to its knees and force it to make peace, and within this framework he made a pact with Russia in 1807. In reality, this was an alliance of the strong with the weak. For example, it obliged Russia to declare war on England and to cease all trade with the English. But the Russians were never able to respect this part of the agreement because trade with England was vital to their economy.
Another, even more ideological element involved saying that going to war with Russia was about setting European civilization against Asiatic barbarism, in which Russia was complicit.
If you asked the question of the Russians, they would have said that Napoleon wanted to conquer Russia.
Napoleon wants to win the war quickly. He expects to defeat the Russian army within 2 months, force Alexander to make peace on Napoleon's terms. But he doesn't want to destroy the Russian Empire, and he doesn't want to chase Alexander off his throne. He wants to fight a limited war.
For Alexander, the enemy to defeat is Napoleon, not France, of whose culture and history he's a big fan. He even likes speaking French as much as he does Russian.
Sir, the Grande Armée crossed the Niemen this morning.
Without a declaration of war? Impossible.
The new French ambassador sent a note 2 days ago saying his mission was finished.
2 days ago? Why wasn't I informed?
We didn't think...
That was their declaration of war.
We are ready to fight, sir.
I do not share that view, General.
But?
The Corsican wants a short war, the outcome of which will be determined by one of those victories that made his glorious career. He wants another Austerlitz. And we are going to deprive him of that pleasure.
By refusing to fight? That is an unworthy attitude.
We will leave him to get lost, which will give us time.
Alexander I is a complicated human being. He is, in some senses, a very wily and tough politician. In other ways, he's a very sensitive and easily hurt individual.
Who wouldn't feel inferior to Napoleon in military terms back then? Alexander tried to command armies during the 1805 campaign, and that ended with a terrible catastrophe at the Battle of Austerlitz. So Alexander knows that he isn't a great military mind, and for the first time in Russian history, in 1812, he agreed to not personally command his armies.
Alexander has learned lessons from his 1805 defeat at Austerlitz. Napoleon skillfully let him believe that he only had 40,000 men left, whereas in reality he had double that. Trapped, tricked, and humiliated, the Tsar and his Austrian ally had abandoned 16,000 dead on the battlefield. This was the first in a long series of victories for the Grande Armée, until it entered Russia 7 years later. To put pressure on Alexander, French spies distribute tracts in the villages to cause concern among the Russian countryfolk.
Imperator Napoleon, не враг вам, примыкайте нему и будет вам свобода и жизнь лучшая.
30 million peasants are living in slavery. The slightest resistance to the nobility is cruelly repressed. They must be dreaming of their freedom. By promising to abolish servitude, perhaps Napoleon can win their loyalty. But despite their suffering, they are attached to their bits of land. It is their world, and as for these Frenchmen approaching, what do they know? At this early stage in the campaign, it's still impossible for either Napoleon or Alexander to predict what the peasants' reaction will be, and to what extent they can be relied upon. Russia is nothing but a huge uncertainty.
Nobody has invaded Russia for 300 years, and the Russian people compared Napoleon's invasion into their land to the invasion of the Mongols and Tatars in their forebears' day.
Pamphile Nazarov is only 20 years old, but the Tsar needs soldiers to fight Napoleon, whom he presents as the Antichrist. And because Pamphile is young and unmarried, he's been picked out by the village community. Young serfs like him are conscripted with the agreement of their owners, who see this as their contribution to the defense of the Russian motherland.
Да пребудет с тобой Господь Бог, Памфил. Я буду молиться за тебя каждый день.
Enrolled for a period of 25 years, they are then considered free men, if they survive. Pamphile Nazarov will have to learn the tough lesson of becoming a soldier, and soon he will be ready to face the Grande Armée.
When they were enrolled into the army, the serfs were almost certain they'd never see their families and loved ones again. Soldiers' lives were incredibly hard.
The regiment became their family, and that was a fundamental element that also explains the courage with which they fought for these substitute families.
The Russian nobility was very afraid that Napoleon would abolish serfdom in Russia, and this created chaos.
The Grande Armée advances towards Vilnius, but the enemy avoids them and refuses to fight. Napoleon's Imperial Guard finally spots a Russian column. This is their first confrontation and their first hand-to-hand battle. Both sides swear they would rather die than give up an inch of terrain. It's a cruel foretaste of the battles to come. The French easily push back their attackers, which fuels the illusion that the Tsar will capitulate in a matter of days. Sergeant Adrien François Bourgogne, Grenadier of Elite of the Imperial Guard, had participated in all Napoleon's campaigns prior to 1812. To him, this long march is just one more campaign.
Sergeant? Duval? Duval! Oh, my friend! Oh, you turned out well. Are you injured?
It's just a scratch. I've come to give you your share of home. A little wagon taken from a Russian general, and everything it contains. We put it all in Florencia's vehicle. She's our cook. She's been with us since Spain. And I took her under my wing. But I only have honourable intentions. Don't listen to the gossip.
Naturally.
You must eat, little one, to give you strength to fight the Russians. Otherwise, I'll tell the Emperor.
In a touching coincidence, in the same regiment, Bourgogne finds 12 men from Condé-sur-Liscaut, his hometown, some 2,000 kilometers away.
And him? What's wrong with him?
He couldn't stand the artillery. At the first cannon fire, he left his line, and only came back when the battle was over.
The Russian general's wine. You can't say no. You'll toughen up, you'll see. One learns to manage one's fears, anxiety, and pain.
Are you ever afraid?
Me and everyone else. I've been injured twice. And I understand what it means. Being picked by chance and taken away from one's family. The forced marches. The sleepless nights while you await the battle.
If my family hadn't been so poor without possessions on land, I would have had someone to replace me. Him. That's why he's here. A conscript paid for him to take his place. I've never touched a penny of my pay. Look at these souls. They're supposed to last 3 years. What are we doing here? Do you know? Who are we fighting for?
Sergeant Bourgogne chose to make a career of the army. In his eyes, Napoleon is infallible.
Come on, soldier.
He cannot possibly imagine that very soon 11 of the comrades he has just found will lose their lives. The Grande Armée is preparing to enter Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. Vilnius was formerly part of Poland before being annexed by Russia, but the Tsar has just abandoned the city. This is good news for the inhabitants of Vilnius and the 30,000 Polish soldiers fighting in the Grande Armée.
When the French entered Vilnius, the Poles and the Polish nobility in particular welcomed the French as their liberators. They thought that Napoleon was giving them their freedom. And better than freedom, he was going to ensure the rebirth of the Polish state.
Alexander was here just a few hours ago. Why would he give me the city without putting up a fight?
Sir, he's doing everything to make this campaign last and to deprive you of a major battle. Time is on his side.
The coward. He has dishonored himself in the eyes of the brave Poles.
Sir, General Balashov, Ambassador for His Imperial Majesty.
Since Peter the Great, no enemy has invaded your land, General Balashov. Yet you allow me to conquer an entire province without even putting up a fight. Are you not ashamed, General?
I can assure you, sir, that the Russians will fight like lions. The Emperor, my master, insists you withdraw your troops.
My brother Alexander is a novice in military affairs. Why did he decide to take on the Supreme Command alone?
He might surprise you.
He will be obliged to ask me for peace before 2 months have passed. We will stay here for a few days to replenish our stores of food, set up hospitals to care for the sick and wounded, and restructure the Lithuanian administration, Berthier, by using the resources of the local elites. We will form a provisional government and proclaim its autonomy.
But nobody will fall for it, sir. The government will be under our control.
Caulaincourt, I didn't ask for your opinion.
Do you intend to declare yourself in favor of Lithuanian independence? To state loud and clear that Poland exists?
There is no question of throwing our alliance with Austria into jeopardy. The Poles will have to wait.
In those conditions, your calls for their patriotism will go unheeded.
Part of Poland still belongs to Austria, and Napoleon needs his Austrian allies to ensure his victory over the Russians.
The Russians did not spontaneously leave when the French arrived. It was a strategy that had been decided upon by the Russian High Command around 1 year before the French entered Russia.
The retreat of the Russian army naturally had to be accompanied by every possible means to slow down the advance of Napoleon's troops. These means included the so-called scorched earth policy that involved destroying all available stocks of food, animal fodder and livestock.
Continuing their pursuit of the evasive Russian army, the Grande Armée leaves Vilnius, and the troops are forced to walk 12 to 25 miles a day, always heading further east. The torrential rain means that every step is a fight with the mud. The Russians have burnt mills and depots, so there's no food for the cavalry. They take rotten straw from the thatched roofs, but the horses die eating it. With no bread and suffering from dysentery and wounds that go unhealed, soon there are thousands of thieves and deserters.
Things started to go wrong from the very first weeks of the campaign. I wouldn't use the word famine, because that's a little excessive, but the first problems of food supplies were emerging.
There were without doubt several tens of thousands of men who were thieving and living off the army without being operational in military terms.
To bring his troops together and foster some kind of cohesion, Napoleon needs the major battle he's been longing for now more than ever. In the distance, they can see a host of tiny lights. They're coming from the Russian army's encampment. It's the Tsar's army. This is the moment they've all been waiting for. Here they are, close by, in his sights. Napoleon's goal is so close now. Tomorrow we'll see the great battle. Just one victory, another Austerlitz, and this war will be over. Sergeant Bourgogne and his men are preparing for the confrontation. They clean their weapons and check their rifles. They cut up sheets in case they're injured. On the battlefield, one must treat one's own wounds. Some are writing their wills, recording their last wishes, but dreaming of seeing their wives and children once more. Others seem carefree, singing or sleeping. On this campaign, Napoleon's losses in terms of men, horses, and equipment are the equivalent of 2 great battles. He needs a victory, and soon.
Sir, you must come, quickly.
I'll be right there, Caulaincourt. Gentlemen.
Napoleon understands that he has been tricked. There will be no battle. The Russians have disappeared without a trace. The army continues on its unremitting way towards Smolensk. The Russian summer is hot, and drinking water is running out. Some battalions only have beer with which to quench their thirst, but they keep going.
Despite all the difficulties during the early days of the campaign, Napoleon has a strategy. He is here to fight. And this strategy almost works because his various troop movements are forcing the Russian army to assemble around the town of Smolensk.
The first artillery is fired at 6 a.m. Napoleon expects to confront the Tsar's armies, but only 20,000 enemy soldiers are present. They've received the order to defend Smolensk, whatever it takes. But behind the ramparts, this wooden town is burning. Men, women and children who were unable to flee are dying, burned alive or asphyxiated by smoke inhalation. The city is lost. Napoleon is victorious. He has captured Smolensk, but by blocking him, the defenders of Smolensk have allowed the main part of the Russian army to escape towards Moscow. Some will compare the tragedy of Smolensk with that of Pompeii.
It's like the eruption of Vesuvius. A fine spectacle, is it not, Master Horseman?
It's horrible, sir.
Ha! Just you remember this. A dead enemy's body always smells good. Roman proverb.
Sir, will you permit me to withdraw?
It's the Russians who are stoking the flames while their army runs away, Caulaincourt. Now it will be the honor of your friend, Alexander, to face me at least once. After which we'll be able to make peace, like two champions reconciling after a duel. War is simply politics, Caulaincourt.
And peace will never happen while we're on this side of the Rhine.
Caulaincourt suffers constantly from the pain I inflict upon his friend.
The Tsar is not my friend. I'm more French than many others who only seek to please and flatter you.
Please, calm down. You're addressing the Emperor.
Why should I be silent? I am honored to have done everything to prevent this war. Sir, give me a mission to Spain. Let me leave this...
You are too sensitive, Caulaincourt. You know the esteem I have for you. Alexander simply declares himself against England, and it'll be all over.
And meanwhile?
If he doesn't wish to see me crowned emperor in the Kremlin, he'd better seek to stop me.
Napoleon believed in a battle because he wanted one, and he would win it. He remained convinced that Alexander would soon be asking for peace, and I realized that all I could do was to count on the good ideas that had until that point made me so happy.
The fate of the town was a tragic one because this place, which had once been so magnificent, was completely destroyed by fire, a fire mainly set by the Russians in accordance with their strategy of scorched earth.
Smolensk was a first turning point of the war in that there were widespread civilian deaths, and they were now also victims of this war.
It's considered that it was from the taking of Smolensk that the patriotic war against the French occupier began.
Napoleon the Invader. In Smolensk, he sets up a town council made of Russian citizens, ordered to obey if they do not wish to be punished, and paid in French currency. He orders them to levy a contribution of wheat, livestock and fodder from the population. These heavy levies serve to foster hatred for the French occupying forces. But the Russians do not understand why Alexander's not fighting back and defending their towns and countryside.
And that triggered a first and very deep crisis of confidence between the Tsar and the Russian population. And also a crisis of confidence inside the Imperial Army itself.
A letter from General Bagration to his friend Yermolov. I am ashamed to wear this uniform. It is killing me. We've been scattered around like pawns, and now we stay here open-mouthed, suffering along our frontiers. It disgusts me so much that it is driving me insane. I'm going to trade my uniform against a peasant's smock. Constantly withdrawing makes the Russian soldiers feel like cowards. Their morale is lower than ever.
All these foreign spies. Your army, sir. It includes 1,000 German officers. All these foreigners dictating this dishonorable retreat. Your troops are no longer inspiring confidence.
That is why I brought you all here. I am going to appoint a supreme commander who will be able to unite the army and the people around him. Our victory depends on this nomination.
Я предлагаю генерала Кутузова.
Alexander I didn't like Kutuzov, firstly because his very face reminded Alexander of the defeat at Austerlitz. Because back then, Kutuzov had suggested an option which the Tsar did not follow, and that led to a terrible fiasco.
Sources said that General Kutuzov liked good food and good women. Different generals denounced him to Alexander I, stating that in both his apartment and on the battlefield, Kutuzov had girls dressed as Cossacks, whose job it was to warm up his bed.
But Alexander I was a very modest man, and from that perspective there was a certain incompatibility in terms of style between the two men.
To lead a war of liberation, a patriotic war, we need a Russian.
In that case, what about General Tomasov?
Kutuzov, sir. He is the oldest. Our best generals, including Bagration and Bennigsen, will agree to serve under him.
He was defeated at Austerlitz.
That doesn't detract from his general popularity. He has just been unanimously elected head of the militias in St. Petersburg and Moscow. His popularity and his exploits in battle speak for him. His bravery goes before him.
General Barclay de Tolly will remain Commander-in-Chief of the First Imperial Army, and General Bagration of the Second Army. But
Kutuzov will be the new Supreme Commander.
Корсиканец презирает меня. После Аустерлица он считает меня ничтожным генералом. Подожди. А между тем это в его войсках полный разбал боевого духа и военной дисциплины. Ладно, воспользуемся этим. Пошли.
As soon as he's named, Kutuzov brings out the patriotism among his troops. Comrades, he writes, do your duty. Think of the sacrifices of your towns brought down in flames and your children begging for your protection. Think of your Emperor Alexander, your leader, who sees you as the embodiment of his power. While the Tsar's army reorganizes itself in a decisive manner, Napoleon demands his men push themselves ever harder. Rest is not worthy of them. Gusts of wind throw up whirlwinds of torturous burning dust. The speed at which they must travel means many horses are lost. And while typhus tears through the troops, Russian propaganda attacks the most vulnerable. French soldiers, you are forced to march against us. They say you are fighting for peace. Don't believe these perfidious words. You are fighting for the insatiable mission for a leader who does not seek peace, and for whom the blood of young men is a mere trifle. Go home. There's still time. These calls for desertion and harassment aim to weaken the Grande Armée, to be able to attack it better. In 2 months, it shrinks radically, because in addition to the sick, the slain, the injured, and the deserters, some units have had to stay behind to hold Vilnius and Smolensk. But nothing stops their progress. Cavalry and infantry keep moving day and night in the hope of reaching the invisible enemy. Every day, this war seems ever more absurd to Caulaincourt, who rebels. We are destroying each other with no result other than gaining ground. But due to the ground gained, Moscow is now just 3 days' march away. Public opinion has pushed Kutuzov's back to the wall. In Borodino, 75 miles from the sacred city, he tries to stop Napoleon. The terrain is rolling and wooded, which slows down the enemy's progression. Kutuzov establishes his defensive line on the southern bank of the Kalosha River, blocking the route to Moscow. He sets up 4 redoubts. The first and biggest of them is the Raevsky redoubt. Then come the 2 more modest Bagration redoubts, and the last one is the Shevardino redoubt as a frontal buffer. A redoubt is an earth fortification constructed like a hillock where a series of cannon are installed. It's defended from below by a trench of soldiers. Behind, there's a massive concentration of Russian troops.
Kutuzov has placed his forces defensively here. He thinks he's protected behind this river, protected by his redoubts. We'll start first by taking the Shevardino redoubt and the village of Borodino. Then we'll be able to position our troops for the final battle. Our northern armies will be inserted here to prevent the Russian army from surrounding us. There you have it.
240,000 men in the Grande Armée against 110,000 Russians. 214 infantry battalions against 180. 317 cavalry squadrons against 20 Cossack regiments. 587 cannon against 624. The sound of cannon fire creates great joy for the French and a strange relief because they're certain this time that the Russians have not decamped. The two armies are to fight in two highly strategic areas. The village of Borodino on the road to Moscow and the Shevardino Redoubt, an essential barrier in the Russian defensive line. In less than an hour, more than 10,000 men are wounded or killed. This is a bloody prelude to the main battle, an attack that will allow the Grande Armée to tackle the Russian resistance. Even when they're wounded, far from calling for help, they refuse to give up and seem determined to die where they fought. But their bravery is not enough. The French take the Shevardino Redoubt. Despite heavy losses, the first step in Napoleon's plan is a success. Each army dresses its wounds. The Russians are reinforcing their defensive lines, and the Raevski and Bagration redoubts in particular. Kutuzov is organizing a solemn procession with the Virgin of Smolensk. Pamphil Nazarov, like his companions, prays for divine protection. His thoughts turn to his family. But he cannot say this as one must be ready to die for God, the Tsar, and Russia. The Russians have never prayed with as much fervor as they did today, wrote the poet Glinka. In these hours, our hearts and souls are having secret conversations with divinity. While the enemy puts itself in God's hands, the Grande Armée, which has never lost faith in Napoleon, waits impatiently for the next morning. The Emperor has slept badly.
Caulaincourt. Thank you.
He went to bed at 3 a.m., worried that the Russians might disappear once again. But when he emerges from his tent, he is confident once again. The first light of dawn reminds him of the sunshine at Austerlitz. The previous evening, he redrew his battle plans. He wants to defeat the southern flank of the enemy forces, to attack the redoubtable fortifications constructed by the Russians, and the great Raevski redoubt in particular. The Emperor's Imperial Guard will stay back, ready to intervene if necessary.
Soldiers, this is the battle we wished for so long. Now, our victory depends on you. We need it. It will bring you wealth, land, and ensure we will soon be home. Fight as you fought in Austerlitz. Your efforts will go down in history, and they will say, he was there at that great battle at the gates of Moscow.
For 10 hours, the armies fight hand to hand. One forgets one's fear under the deluge of bullets, cannonballs, and shells. One barely notices one's comrades as they fall, struck down at point-blank range. The Russians will call it the Battle of Borodino. The French will talk of the Battle of Moskva. Positions are taken, lost, taken back, and lost again. The 2nd Cavalry Corps of General Montbrun must now charge to the right of the Raevski redoubt. Montbrun is looking for the right position from which to attack. He heads off on a reconnaissance mission by horse, but unfortunately is hit in the chest by a cannonball. Napoleon then decides to replace him with Auguste de Caulaincourt, the brother of Armand. The Russian infantry, destabilized by the fatal wounding of General Bagration, pulls itself together and redoubles its efforts to regain lost ground. The actors in this carnage speak of hell, of a burning sky, of the apocalypse, and cannon spitting death. Caulaincourt suddenly has a terrible premonition. At 3 p.m., his brother, Auguste, at the head of the 5th Regiment of Cuirassiers, supported by 2 divisions and 2 infantry battalions, makes an assault on the great Raevski redoubt. The Russians must beat a retreat. The wounded beg to be put out of their misery and be relieved of their terrible suffering. The Russians abandon their positions, but their army has not been annihilated. The battle was hellish, but if there is to be a winner, there must also be a loser.
I think it's very difficult to evaluate the results of the Battle of Borodino, because Napoleon and Kutuzov each had their own objectives, and neither Napoleon nor Kutuzov achieved them. Napoleon's aim was to totally defeat the Russian army. Kutuzov's aim was to stop the French and to protect Moscow.
What did it mean to win a battle at that time? One might say that the winner is the army that is in control of the battlefield. If that's the case, then there was a clear winner at the Battle of Moskova, because the Russians withdrew and the French stayed in control of the terrain. Therefore, Napoleon won the Battle of Moskova. It is true that in strategic terms, the Battle of Moskova weakened the Grand Army, and that's why the Russians claim it as a victory. Everyone might agree if we said that the French won the Battle of Moskova and the Russians didn't lose the Battle of Borodino.
It's a disappointing victory for Napoleon and so costly in terms of human life. But the Imperial Guard, the elite of the Grande Armée, stay back. Sergeant Bourgogne thus watched the battle from a distance, unlike so many of his compatriots who found themselves in the front line. Napoleon was prudent, too prudent perhaps, and didn't want to take the risk of weakening his guard. But if he had sent Bourgogne and his men into the melee, the victory might perhaps have been greater. Lives might have been saved. Bourgogne's companions might have gone home safe and sound. So many heroes, soldiers, officers, and generals. Caulaincourt will never forget that gruesome day.
We will triumph, or I shall kill myself, were the last words Auguste said to me. He had led the decisive charge against the great redoubt. Did he have the time to enjoy it before being killed by an enemy bullet? For the Emperor, France had lost one of its best officers, but I had lost a brother. He was 35 years old.
During this dreadful day, 120,000 cannonballs and 300,000 cartridges were fired, resulting in a terrible loss of human life. 45,000 Russians died, were injured or gone, more than a third of the troops. Napoleon lost 28,000 men. This slaughter pushes the medical services to their limits. Many injured people are left on the battlefield without help. In the Grande Armée, there is one doctor and one pharmacist for every 600 soldiers. 45 surgeons care for victims on both sides. It takes less than 4 minutes to amputate a leg. 10,000 wounded beyond help are left in the surrounding villages where most of them will die. Napoleon then waits for the following day's hostilities, but Kutuzov has another idea.
Why did Kutuzov not continue the battle the following day as he had promised? At the end of the battle, he gave orders to attack Napoleon's troops the following morning. But later on that night, he gave an order that was totally contrary, to withdraw. The most likely reason was that he had received information in the meantime regarding losses in the Russian army. And these losses were terrible.
Kutuzov spends a long time with his generals, weighing up the pros and cons of a new fight, eventually admitting that his troops aren't strong enough to stop Napoleon, and that it will be better to spare them and take some time to find reinforcements. "420,000 soldiers crossed the Niemen River 3 months earlier. Now, just half of them remain. They came from France, Spain, and Italy. They'd traveled over 2,500 miles, crossed the Alps or the Pyrenees, and traveled through Germany, Poland, and Western Russia. At last, they think they're going to get the rest they desperately need. But Napoleon remains convinced that the arrival of the Grande Armée at the gates of Moscow will be the coup de grâce that will force Alexander to negotiate. Sergeant Bourgogne remembers. After having crossed through a big forest, we finally caught our first glimpse of Moscow. And in moments like these, one forgets everything. The dangers, the fatigue, the comrades lost, and only one thing counts: the pleasure of entering the promised land. But Napoleon, who dreamed of entering the city as a conquering hero, like in Vienna and Berlin, discovers that Moscow has been abandoned, and no public figure is going to come and hand him the keys to the city. Only those who had neither the money nor the time to flee remain. Napoleon moves into the Kremlin with his guard and his services in attendance. His generals occupy the luxury homes of the Moscow nobility.
Where are our divisions?
Sir, fires have been started all across the city. It seems that it was the Russians
No, I don't believe it. These barbarians can't possibly be so crazy as to destroy Moscow.
There are no fire engines left. They took them all.
Then find the arsonists. And we'll hang them when we do.
First, they believe the fires are accidental, set by drunken soldiers celebrating their first night in Moscow.
Засыпай порох, сейчас все подорвем.
But it soon becomes clear that these fires are no accident. Dozens of arsonists are scattered around the city. Who are they? And who is giving orders to create this inferno?
Sergeant, I think we found some treasure.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Get down!
Kutuzov chose to abandon Moscow to avoid a new confrontation and to reorganize his troops. That is why the Governor-General of the city, Count Rostopchin, left to his own devices, orders reprisals by burning warehouses, storerooms, and palaces. Nothing is to be left to the invading forces.
Is everyone okay?
Yes, Sergeant.
Sergeant Bourgogne remembers. When the explosion happened, we thought we were dead, annihilated under the debris. The Russians didn't care how they tried to destroy us.
Are you wounded, Sergeant?
It's nothing.
Where are we? This is where we should sleep.
You're too ugly and you smell too bad to sleep in a palace. Sergeant, come and look. What do we do with it, Sergeant?
We take it. Look out! It's all collapsing. Let's get out of here. Come on.
Danger is everywhere. Napoleon's Grande Armée has fallen into a burning trap. Surrounded by flames and blinded, they still dream of victory.